Now, welcome back to part 4 of The Awakening, episode 14 from Straight Shooting News. Bigger than Biden, stand up now or surrender our freedoms. The dive is getting deeper now. So, we just heard from Neal Ferguson explaining how he sees this as a Cold War. He's correct. Now, let's take a look at how Communist China plans to circumvent what Neal Ferguson laid out and how to stop them by staying a step ahead of them technologically. So they cannot advance on the rest of the world and take down our country. So we are compromised now, and the Communist Chinese plan is unfolding. We're being taken down from within. I'm going to show you some examples now. Roll it.
White House is still refusing to answer any questions about the whistleblower who says Joe Biden sold out America to foreign nationals. Watch this.
I'm going to have to refer you to the Justice Department on that. I have nothing for you on that today.
No, do you know what this is, what country this pertains to, or what policy decision?
I have nothing for you, sir. I'm going to have to refer you to the Justice Department.
Yeah, I mean, I know of at least one decision that Joe Biden made years ago about pretty much waiving all federal audit requirements for Chinese-listed companies on U.S. exchanges. And I'm wondering if this is one of the decisions that you're looking at. As we've discussed before, back in 2013, then Vice President Biden signed a memorandum of understanding with Chinese officials to allow all these Chinese companies to trade on our exchanges, and they didn't have to follow any of the audit rules that other public companies have to. You told me you were looking at 6 specific decisions that Joe Biden made that could be decisions that he was paid for personally. Is that one of them?
Well, Maria, the odds that that's one of them are very high right now.
I've said from day one, this is a Joe Biden story, not a Hunter Biden story. I mean, to say what does Joe Biden have to do with this is absolutely absurd. He's got everything to do with it. It is Joe Biden that they're paying for. He was a sitting vice president. He's a sitting president. They want his approval or his ability to give them access to getting into America in some way. I mean, that's why the CCP is buying up land and trying to buy up land. Did he allow that? Why did he walk into the White House and shut down the China initiative as one of his first
That's a big deal
jobs?
Right there, Maria.
On building a $2.3 billion electric vehicle battery plant near Big Rapids. Questions persist. Questions persist over the Chinese company.
News 8's Byron Tollefson joins us now from the Capitol, where some lawmakers want the plan dropped.
While a Michigan Senate committee has delayed whether to approve a huge chunk in funding for this battery plant, today a group of Republicans called for the plan to be paused because of Gotion's apparent ties to the Chinese Communist Party. With the proposed plan near Big Rapids yet to be finalized, Republican lawmakers and allies today calling for the state to start from scratch.
I believe it brought us to a point in the Michigan legislature where we should be pumping the brakes on this project.
Supporters call the Gotion project a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create 2,300 jobs and keep young people in the area. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has backed the plan, saying it will shore up the state's status as a global hub of mobility and electrification. She attended the plant announcement last fall. Many residents there feel differently, with protests this month over worries about the environmental impact and Gotion's connections to the Chinese Communist Party. This afternoon, state Senate Republicans called on Congress to investigate the company's relationship with the CCP, fearing a risk to national security.
When we ask the questions, we're being told that we're conspiracy theorists and that we're play acting at national security.
A Gotion executive in the U.S. says the allegations have no basis in fact whatsoever, insisting the Chinese Communist Party has no influence on North American operations.
Despite what any current politicians might say, there is no communist plot within Gotion to make Big Rapids a center to spread communism.
Still, Republicans say the state did not do enough due diligence when reviewing the project.
If we can't take the time to vet the project, think through these questions, and ensure that we're not making Michigan taxpayers complicit with activities that Michigan taxpayers do not want to be complicit in, then how can we consider ourselves serious policymakers?
Former West Michigan Congressman Pete Hoekstra calling for an end to the project entirely.
And I am confident that after they take a look at the changes in what has happened in the geopolitical atmosphere, the answer will be not now, not ever, taking Michigan taxpayer dollars and sending them to the Chinese Communist Party.
Democrats haven't signed off on the plan either. Last week, the Senate Appropriations Committee gave money to other battery plant projects, but not Gotion's. The Democrat leading that committee says their members need more questions answered before approving $175 million in state incentives. But some Republicans' minds are made up.
I think we should go back to drawing board and really build out some tools to do a deep dive evaluation of this partnership and this project.
In Lansing, Byron Tollefson, News 8.
We attempted to talk with Governor Whitmer today to find out whether she still supports this project, but her office has not returned our messages.
Democrat Governor Wood has not returned their calls. So what we have here, they were saying we have to stay ahead of the communist Chinese. So now they want to build an electric battery plant. Green energy, there you go, popping up again. And they're going to compromise Michigan from Big Rapids, Michigan, and the Chinese company Gotion. The man lied right to you when he said that this Chinese battery company has nothing to do with the Communist Chinese Party. Every company that functions out of China is directly involved with the Communist Chinese Party, the Communist Chinese military. So are they on this road with Gotion? And they're going to create jobs. So think about this. They're going to create jobs if you surrender your right and your future for that job. When you look in the mirror and think your job is more important than the freedoms of everyone, our Constitution, the freedoms of future generations, if you're in favor of this, then you can't be in favor of any of these communist Chinese people coming in. Any company. In other words, if you want to kick the can down the road because you want the good paying, fluffy job, about future generations. But let's take a look at how the taxpayers in that area and people in Michigan are trying to fight back on a local level. Roll this.
Build an electric vehicle battery plant near Big Rapids. Tonight, residents voicing their worries to the Mecosta County Planning Commission. News 8's Demetria Sanders was at that meeting and spoke to residents tonight.
Well, despite the item regarding the EV battery plant being taken off tonight's agenda, Gotion, the company behind the plant, says that won't slow down their timeline to build the facility, but that didn't stop residents from coming out tonight to say they don't want Gotion in their community. It was a packed house at the Mecosta County Planning Commission meeting Thursday night as people spoke against Gotion's planned EV battery plant in Green Charter Township.
There's a lot of people that want to say something. Right now, it's the only way we can do it.
Originally on the agenda was a rezoning request by Gotion. According to the county's director of building and zoning, portions of land near the proposed battery plant site are already zoned industrial. The company wanted the commission to approve rezoning an additional 11 parcels.
The portions that Gotion was looking to rezone were an extension past where that property stopped and other property began.
But the request was delayed after the company said they were waiting to learn the results of a review by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States and wanted more time to answer the community's questions about the project. Some say they aren't buying it. These people are a thorn in their side. As people protested inside and outside of the Mecosta County Services Building, concerns about the battery plant continued, including Goshen's ties to China and how it will impact a small town. It's just crazy that they want to put it up here in the middle of nowhere and not in a metropolitan area with rail, shipping, all the stuff that makes it economical to produce. Others say they're worried about the environmental effects.
We don't want a big cement factory. Piled cement over a beautiful swamp, a beautiful wetlands, full of ducks. It's a migratory place. There's so many things that's wrong with this.
But despite delaying their rezoning request on Thursday, Cole says that wouldn't impact Goshen's ability to start construction on the pieces of land currently zoned industrial.
According to the zoning ordinance, it isn't allowable by right for a manufacturing plant to go in there. The only stipulation is they would have to have a site plan review, and that would have to come back in front of the Planning Commission.
Now, if Goshen does move forward with the rezoning request, it will once again have to go in front of the Planning Commission, where we will likely see another large turnout. In Big Rapids, Demetria Sanders, News 8.
He's right. They are Marxist-Leninists, to be precise. I think Xi Jinping in particular should be understood both seriously and literally as a Marxist-Leninist. But again, I spent time in China prior to the pandemic. I was a visiting professor at Tsinghua. I remember having a meeting with the director of research at the Chinese Communist Party, who's really rather an important figure. And he said in the course of that meeting, oh, by the way, the Standing Committee of the Politburo is rereading Marx and Engels. And so I think you should assume that there is an ideological piece to Cold War II. Many naive people think that that is not the case because they pay a visit to Beijing or Shanghai and they see what appear to be business tycoons behaving much as business tycoons do. They see tower blocks. It looks familiar. But you really need to understand that behind this patina of capitalism, there is still a Communist Party in charge. And if you look at what Xi Jinping says, not at Davos, but in Beijing, or just look at other Communist Party propaganda, it's very striking how ideological things have become. He has explicitly prohibited the teaching of democracy, rule of law, Western ideas like that at Chinese universities. In the time I was at Tsinghua, there was a noticeable change in the atmosphere. It no longer became easy for me to talk in the classroom about the Cultural Revolution. So let's lay to rest the idea that they're just pretending to be communists, that it's just the Chinese Capitalist Party. That's nonsense. And the ideological piece explains the belief that there is an inevitable collision coming with the imperialist West, which I think does underlie Chinese strategy. Xi Jinping, I think, it's pretty clear, has told the party and the country to prepare for war. And they talk a lot about China's role to displace the United States as the dominant empire. So remember, Marxism-Leninism is an ideology of conflict. It's an ideology with a historical determinist operating system. And that's a reason to expect them to expect conflict. And that.
So we had to throw the Neal Ferguson clip at the end, just to remind people who they're dealing with. So, what are the people of the county doing in Michigan? The locals. There's local zoning. I wanted to bring that up because they're going to fight as hard as they can. You see the lies coming from the state. State wants money. What's going on here? I mean, even with the environmentalists, do they really care about the environment there? Are they just shills controlling power in Germany? On the local zoning matter, in my town where I live, a town meeting just voted to have a study come in that was suggested by the town manager because the state's handing down regulations. A state, it's definitely going to be hurting for money. Revenues are drying up from the emergency funding. People fled the state. We're also being invaded by many people who don't know coming over the border. But the point is, they're going to review all our zoning not the local people who care about zoning laws as protection. These are people who are going to just comply with whatever the state tells them to do. A state, we have to worry. I'm in a blue state. We have to worry about where their money's coming from. We already know they're hurting for money. Now they're trying to push things like what they call an MBTA community, where you have to have so many houses and this and that in different areas. I'm not going to go too deep in this segment here, but local zoning does matter. And Chinese money is influencing everybody, from the governors down to local politics, and even people that are totally unaware of what's taking place. That plant is a plant by the Chinese military. Like the man said, if they really wanted efficiency, they would build it where it's close to everything. They're building this out in the middle of nowhere for a reason. For a reason. They're waiting, as the man said there, about the federal government ruling on foreign investments. This is where the battle's taking place federally, because this has to be stopped. This is what's at stake. Anybody who's sitting there looking at chops over a job, like I just told you, showed you the previous clip, you're selling out freedoms for future generations. Now, I want to go back and we just want to play you one short reminder of what Neal Ferguson said about the world reigning currency.
It's one of the reasons that it's recognizably Cold War II, because there are two superpowers technologically. Now, I think the Chinese are still silver medalists. Look, and I basically agree with your view that our system is likely to win the innovation race. But I have a couple of caveats. An American is that you are the issuer of the world's reserve currency and the currency that is favored in almost all international transactions, and you can sell your 10-year treasuries to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world will buy them because they foolishly think it's a risk-free asset. So if you lose geopolitics, as Britain did in the late 1950s, it's amazing how rapidly your currency can depreciate. I mean, and that's to be taken very seriously. The United States would find it expensive to be a second-tier power. Is that we find ourselves trying to prevent the expansion of Chinese power in multiple theaters. Containment is not the word we necessarily use, but we're already doing it. And it's funny, really, to be engaged in a Cold War without acknowledging that. Kind of put the sanctions on China ex ante rather than waiting for a showdown. That's a really important part of Cold War. The effort of the leading power to preserve its technological leadership by preventing the rising power from catching up. I think that's the plausible future that we have to fight in multiple geographies, but above all, we have to fight to maintain our technological leadership. That's the future I think we're in.
Much as it was with the Soviet Union during the Cold War, the United States is in a global competition with a major authoritarian regime led by a communist party. While China and the Soviet Union differ in important respects, the United States can draw on historical lessons from the Soviet challenge in responding to China's expanding global ambitions. First, the U.S. must recognize, as Reagan did in the Cold War, that the China challenge involves a global battle of ideas. The U.S. must demonstrate that its interests are consistent with its founding principles in a freer and more democratic world. China, meanwhile, will continue to use its enormous commercial might and the lure of its vast consumer markets to snare other countries into relationships of dependence and subservience. Second, the U.S. must pursue peace through strength, blending force and diplomacy, hard and soft power, pressure and outreach. As China continues to threaten an invasion of Taiwan, the U.S. and its allies in the region should work together to deter the use of force. Lastly, the U.S. must operate, as did Reagan's team, with the ever-present awareness that geopolitics typically entails painful trade-offs, tragic choices, and alternatives ranging from bad to dreadful. The guiding question for American diplomats should always be which of the imperfect options best secures U.S. freedom and prosperity. Following these lessons will lead to a freer and more peaceful world.
Go. Your principles. What are your principles? We know what our principles are in the U.S., even though sometimes it doesn't appear we have these rights under some of these tyrannical administrations, but we have them. They can directly conflict with the communist Chinese principles of communism, totalitarianism, and we are in a global war. It may be cold for now, but it could turn hot. With that being said, in our next segment, we're going to take a real deep dive with the dark journalist. He goes into some historic parts that you need to know if you're not already aware of them. So we're going to see you in part 5.